Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
We're going to have Mark Kaigwa, who flew in all the way from Kenya, and he arrived on in time this morning. And Mark and I actually met at a conference up in the Scandinavian in Sweden. And it was amazing because we were both on the same panel, and it was just Africa and China. So I was like, are we on the people of color panel? Like, did the Swedes just do this to us? And I think they did, but I think we expanded their minds and showed them what people of color do around the world. But the really exciting thing about, I remember what Mark's panel was about, was that he made a really good point about African user habits with mobile browsers, was that on their mobile phones, is that 80%, right, of them are using mobile browsers, apps that are built in mobile browsers. So they're not using native built apps. And I think that introduces a really interesting conversation for the kind of things that we program. So that was a really interesting insight. So I thought it'd be great to have Mark actually come in, because he works with iHub, and he works, he's actually one of the people who popularizes or evangelizes about Silicon Savannah. And he's doing some really interesting consulting with private companies and public companies out, and trying to understand connecting users back to social services around the state also. So really exciting stuff. Really want to hear his story, and also you should ask him about the time that we all ended up naked in a spa with Swedes after a conference, which we think maybe SES can actually explore doing that next time. Because we really bonded, you know, like totally.
It brought us together, Tricia.
Yeah, it did. And what we're going to do is actually, since we're running out of time, we're just going to go straight to questions, open up to the audience for Mark for 5 minutes after his, and then we'll do the same for Panthea, and then we'll do questions for everybody else.
All right, thanks. So yeah, fresh off a plane, and just before I start, I'd just like to issue thanks once again to Lily and to Liz, and just to Tricia, yourself, and everybody who helped the State Department and the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi do things I never thought possible to get me here. So thank you, and it's great to be an honor and a privilege to bring Nairobi to you in person. So when you think about Kenya, a couple of things could come to mind. Well, beautiful safaris. You could think of the economic capital of East Africa. You could think about the world's best runners, all right? But don't ask me to sprint around the block. And you could think of one person in particular. You might be familiar with him by now. He happens to be your president, Barack Obama. Yeah, he does have Kenyan lineage. But all of that didn't matter as much. In 2007, in 2008, really, just the end of 2007, 2008, when we had a contested election, the last election we had, and that led to some unrest and a disputed result, and it tainted Kenya's previously peaceful history of over half a century, really. And things boiled over around ethnicity and who we are. Kenya's a very rich country. It's got over 42 tribes, and that really spun against us for political gain at this time. But all of that led to our country becoming a lot stronger, a lot closer, and us getting invested in making sure that never happened again. And most importantly, it jolted one person in particular, a whistleblower who uncovered just 2 years before the country's largest political corruption scandal, a gentleman by the name of John Githongo, and he's, this big burly guy with, round glasses, and a journalist and very, very good speaker. And he, in exile in London, after uncovering, $600 million that had, disappeared and gone to a fake company, he came back to Nairobi, to Kenya, set up again, and was determined to create an intervention, right, that would make sure that in March of this year, just 2 months from now, March 4th, 2013, when we have another election, we wouldn't go back to what we saw in 2007 and 2008. And so amidst that, and amidst the scoping and years' worth of work, getting funding, getting partners in media and across all of these different sectors, public and private, him and his entire organization of some of the smartest people around all determined to show Kenyans that leadership is present around them. We don't have to resort to the political class. They got bogged down. They got out of touch with the end user, with the person that they were hoping to have the impact on. And that's when our paths collided, and one of the project directors asked for me to meet with them and just to sit down. And for me, I knew I was sitting down with incredibly smart people. They had a network of almost 10,000 of the best and well-connected young people in the country sitting all across the map. But in the midst of moving this huge beast forward and getting all of these approvals, something had gone amiss along the way in terms of the vision. And so sitting down with something that may be familiar to all of you, some of you maybe have practiced this for years, maybe decades, and are familiar with the thinking behind design thinking or user-centered design. But walking through with this group, just empathy exercises and creating specifically personas completely changed the game for this particular group. Like I said, they had the data, they had the insights from across the country, but what came out of just specifically the personas exercise was a revelation to them. It was coming up and going back to where it all starts. And to give you an analogy of what the political landscape is like in Kenya, it's, think of a dais and think of a gentleman, a politician of some kind, standing on top with a sound system able to power a small concert and just speaking to a crowd of people, right? And what we were trying to change at that point before was the message that came out, and change the message, but keeping everything constant. And the shift that came out of this little session of empathy and personas was that it's not about changing the message from the top of the pulpit, for example, but it's about starting with the user and why they showed up to this field in the first place. And that led to a pretty big shift in the focus and in the vision, and specifically in the clarity of having a Kenyan in mind from every single point of the campaign. And the action that took place as a result was just at the launch, just when teaser billboards were going all over the city around Uongozi, which is Swahili for leadership, and it's the name of the campaign, which is also in a television show and a number of other things across media. Just when the billboards began to show, politicians threatened, actually raised it as a point of order in Parliament itself, saying, we don't understand what this is, and these guys are trying to intervene in Kenyans selecting their own leadership, but they felt threatened, and that's because it spoke directly to the heart of what Kenyans were facing at that time. Doctors at the time, we had one particular billboard that talked about the parallels between doctors and politicians, who are amongst the world's best paid Kenyans are. And what that led to was even the doctors going on strike and subsequently getting much better packages. Thanks. And kind of the point of the action for me that came out of this was that I'm more familiar with the stories, the intricacy of storytelling. But here you had people with incredible data, and when they stepped back towards stories and looked back at the insights that they had, it led to a much clearer and more focused action that I hope come March 4th will pay for itself if it hasn't already. Thank you.
Can you give us a 30-second story of what one of the personas so we can understand
Sure.
an example came out of it?
So one of them is called Vota, V-O-T-A, which is kind of a nickname. I didn't agree with the name because I thought it's like a little too obvious. But like how much everybody backed that name almost shocked me, because I was like, isn't this a bit of a... I almost said it, but I let the group kind of discuss it amongst themselves. And he's a 23-year-old young man. He's not gainfully employed, and so what he does is he sits at what's called, think of it just as a small little kiosk, a small little store in a peri-urban area, so it's closer to the rural areas. And all he does every day is go through the newspapers. He might get on public transport and help move passengers into that. But his political views and the media that he's exposed to, which is primarily English Premier League football and the news that follows these games, puts him in a position as an influencer at a local level amongst people under 30 that distinguishes him in almost every particular instance you'll find him. And we went out subsequently with a bunch of assumptions to prove and disprove them. And it really solidified, I think, a lot of what we had and helped change tact where necessary.